Welcome to the beautiful city of Athens, the gateway to the Tennessee Valley, a city rooted in deep community relationships and built on a rich tradition of small local business and the very best of the human spirit. As Athens embraces the future, the signs of progress are in full bloom. Join us as we discover the bright spots in this charming southern city that we call home. This is Hometown Heartbeat, Athens. What's going on, everybody? Zach Walker here, Hometown Heartbeat number 48. Math is hard. Hometown Heartbeat episode 48. We have a very special guest today. But before we do that, I want to introduce Connor and watch a video briefly. But Connor, how you doing today, buddy?
Doing good. Good to be here on Memorial Day.
Connor, what did you do all weekend?
I was up in Pickwick with my grandparents.
Oh, look. Oh, wait. Hold that shot. Go back. Go back.
Oh, you want me to?
Hey, in-studio audience today. That's right, folks. We're so important. We have an in-studio audience here on Hometown Heartbeat, episode number 48. Anyways, that's good. You went to Pickwick, right? Did you get a sunburn?
No.
You seem like a really responsible kid. I bet you wore sunscreen.
Yes. Yeah, I was
much
responsible.
better than I was as a child. Great. Well, look, today is Memorial Day, and before we dive into my response to that, which we certainly will dive into, because it's my show, and so I'm going to give you my opinion whether you like it or not. But before we dive into that, I would like to watch a video. It's a video that I woke up to this morning. It was on my Facebook feed, or it's a similar video, but it's a video that I've watched multiple times today that I've made my 4-year-old son sit down and watch. That as I watch emotionally and something that I want to dive into before we introduce our guest and dive into all that. But let's watch this video first, and then and we'll be right back. So before we dive into the guest and the topic of the day, I just want to address what today is. I hear a lot of Happy Memorial Day or enjoy your Memorial Day, and for many of us, it's a symbol of life's lost, of friendships gone. For men and women across this country, it symbolizes the ultimate sacrifice one can give to the freedom of this country. And so today, as you enjoy your day off, look, I'm not saying don't go enjoy an afternoon and get on the boat and go to the lake and do whatever. I'm not saying do that, but you observe this day. You don't celebrate this day. And this is a day that, like I said, for many people, it's a very introspective day would be the way I would say it. And it leads us right into our topic for today. And so today we have Lisa Worthey Smith with us, the author of many books, many leather-bound books in my library that smells of rich mahogany. For those of you that know what I'm talking about, you're laughing hard. The other ones have never seen Anchorman. But we're going to dive into 2 books. One, The Ground Kisser, and I'm learning this story. So, Lisa, help me out with this, but I want to make sure I got this right. So, The Ground Kisser was you wrote this book.
Yes.
In doing so, you met a couple.
Yes.
In Morgan County.
Yes.
And now you've walked down this journey of identifying how many?
23.
23 men that have all that all died in Vietnam, that came back to a lack of to no welcome to speak of, to no reception, who have laid in graves that have been unmaintained, that have been, I mean, I hesitate to say desecrated, but in my opinion, a veteran's grave that's unmaintained is a desecrated grave. And that led you down this journey. So before we dive into this journey, because let me tell you something, folks, when I start running through these chapter titles, it's not what you think it is, because there's a lot of context that applies to today, but it is exactly what you think it is, and it is perfect for a day like Memorial Day. So Fox correspondent Oliver North, Lieutenant Colonel retired, by the way, says, "Bless you for remembering and honoring unsung heroes from your country, made the ultimate sacrifice during the Vietnam War. The price of liberty is eternal vigilance, semper fidelis." And then Gary Sinise, who is a very well-known veterans advocate, an actor, an activist, all different things. He's just an all-around good guy. "Please know that your loved one's service and your family sacrifice for our great country will not be forgotten or be taken for granted. May God bless you and your loved ones, and may God continue to bless and watch over our America. Your grateful American pal, Gary Sinise." So, enough of me talking. Talk me through this process, because we were off camera before you joined us. We were talking about the process of writing a book, and it sounds like something I never want to endeavor to do in my entire life. But walk us through that. I mean, what led down this road? I mean, obviously, if you want to give us a little context on the Ground Kisser and kind of what led you down that path, but I would love to hear the story of how North Alabama plays into all this and kind of how it all went.
Okay.
I guess.
Well, I have written other books before The Ground Kisser, and one of those other books came into the hand of Tan Young Boyer, who was from Vietnam. She was from Tan Chau, An Giang, Vietnam, in the Mekong Delta.
That's a pretty normal name. I got that. Tan Chau. Got it.
And she contacted me after reading one of my other books and asked me to write her story. People had begged her to tell her story because it is so amazing, so filled with pirates and gold and abandoned island and near death for a year.
It's not fiction either.
It's not. You can't make this stuff
Okay.
up.
Now I want to read that story too.
So because of our marketing efforts with The Ground Kisser, one of her main goals was to thank Vietnam veterans who did not get a thank you or a welcome home when they arrived back.
So I want to not to interrupt. I want to stop you there, and we're going to get to some. But there are a lot of people. Connor, for instance, has only read about. And I mean, I've only read. Don't get me wrong. I didn't live through Vietnam, but I, as a military veteran, as someone who loves history, I've spent a tremendous amount of time researching and diving into. And so, for me, I know exactly what you're talking about. But there is a generation of people that are the type of people that listen to podcasts and watch Facebook Live. So our audience that may very well not understand, like, their only context is Afghanistan and Iraq. So Vietnam was a very political war, and it was a very different war. And there was a lot of, at the beginning of the war, huge
ticker tape parades for homecoming heroes.
So talk us through that process. So, like, I mean, we send our guys off, and we're all fired up about it. We're going to do the right thing very quickly. I mean, I blame it on Woodstock, but and I don't, correct me, but the hippie movement and it's all the same time frame, and all of a sudden there's no such thing as a acceptable death. Or war is wrong. I mean, whoa. Ooh, it's spawned one of the greatest songs of all times. But like, talk us through that time in history, because a lot of people don't understand anything about it, and so that context I feel is important to understand the fact that they got no reception when they got home.
In World War I and World War II, people understood communism. They understood the evilness of Hitler and communism and
take notes.
and the Nazism, National Socialist. I didn't realize that until I started doing research. Nazi, National Socialist, term that's tossed around very casually today. But they understood the evil there, and we didn't have embedded reporters to show us the horrors of the war. The men came home, they were rewarded, ticker tape parades, and they were the hometown heroes. But as media and technology
and
advanced,
journalism died in that moment. As journalism died, media advanced, all those different things. It's like an ingredient bowl of just...
Once it bleeds, it leads.
Yeah,
took
there
hold,
it is. That's right.
Then we started taking opinion instead of news. So even today, it's pretty easy to see a lot of our news has turned to opinion, and we take it as fact when it isn't. Walter Cronkite is often noted for reading the news, and he did. He read the news over the airwaves and didn't offer commentary until he went to Vietnam. And he reported from Vietnam, and his countenance is heavy, and he's holding his head, and he's just in tears, saying to the American public, "We're at a stalemate. We can't win." Well, when that went over the airwaves, and Lyndon Johnson heard that, said, "If I've lost Walter Cronkite, I've lost Middle America." He announced within weeks he would not run for presidency again. When Nixon came in, he saw the tide had turned. And that's true. The Woodstock movement, the hippie movement, the give peace a chance, people who didn't realize giving peace meant turning over everything you had to communist control, surrendering everything. And yes, that all played a part. Jane Fonda, John Kerry, all of those people, the Vietnamese, the North Vietnamese, the communist Vietnamese, used as propaganda. And they publicized it and effectively turned America against the Vietnam War. And where we had been in those early generations, World War I, World War II, we had been the generations of, I'm going to do my part. Women washed and saved aluminum foil in order to give more to the military. We cut down on electricity. We did whatever we could, bought war bonds and all of those things to help our military overcome this threat, this communist threat that was steamrolling across Europe.
So just to be clear, I just want to make sure that I make this. I would be remiss if I didn't make this point. What you're saying is, and now do not let me mistake this. Nazi Germany, Nazi leadership, the Nazi movement was a socialist movement fundamentally.
Absolutely, that's what Hitler called it. Although
are you listening? Are you listening? Have you paid any attention? And we're going to tie all this back in because I'm going to let her pass the baton to me because she's wrote a book that you need to go buy, and I'm not going to let her go down the road that I'm more than willing to go down because I could care less. And so at some point we will get there, but we're going to go back. We're going to stay in history, stay in context. I'm like a dog when I come off the leash. You got to be really careful. So I'm leashing myself. I'm pulling myself back. Okay. So here we are. Walter Cronkite. We've lost him. We've watched America go from we will fight socialist Nazis to you know what, the Vietnamese, let's just give peace a chance. I love that. That's a great way to sum up that era of American that said, just give peace a chance. We can give peace a chance, but if those who are in charge in whatever fill-in-the-blank country we're in, if peace to them looks different than it does to you, then us giving peace a chance is a worthless endeavor. Because peace to us is one thing entirely. Peace for us means we leave. We're out. We're good. Don't touch it. What does that mean for them? It means if you don't give us everything you own, we kill you. And so that's the situation in Vietnam at this point. This presidential thing's happening, all that. And then let's jump all the way to the war's over. Now people are coming back. It was a long war to end. I mean, it was that era's equivalent of an Iraq and an Afghanistan, right?
Yes.
I mean, it was an ongoing, we
were trying to equip them to fight their own battles. So in that relation, it was very much like Afghanistan.
Just so you know, the connection between Vietnam and Afghanistan, Iraq, if you don't see it, you don't know enough about history. I would love to educate. I mean, everybody's like, well, my generation didn't have an Afghanistan. No, it did. It absolutely did. And guess what? Your generation today, that the millennials that don't even know how to shower without help. And unfortunately, that's me. But for the record, I'm speaking of me. Like, I can say that and not indict anyone else because unfortunately I'm lumped into that generation. But that generation doesn't understand Vietnam. Yes, you do. You do. I'm telling you, it's Iraq and Afghanistan. The similarities in the longevity, in some ways, like, I mean, I'm a military vet. I'm a constitutionally conservative guy, but I also find myself looking at the futility towards the end of the war in some ways and saying the cost, is it worth it? Is it not? And the cost being, I've experienced that, right? And so I would never stand up and say, pull everybody out, let's go the other way. But it's an evaluation we have to take on as Christians, as Americans, as whatever. And so I don't disagree with people's I don't know, not necessarily opposition to, but their willingness to ask questions and to become educated about Vietnam, about Iraq, about Afghanistan. You fill in the blank. You're an American citizen. You get the right. You vote.
And
right?
there was an end in sight for the Vietnam War. Had they been able to maintain a blockage of the Ho Chi Minh Trail, we would have been able to block that supply route. And I have quotes in here from 2 different Vietnamese colonels who said, "We were so surprised when you left Saigon. We thought we were about to have to surrender."
That's amazing. Did you get to interview these men, or
no? These are quotes I pulled from public domain.
Yes. So I would love to dive into like the interviews you got to get, because I'm sure there were some very interesting conversations. There's some very, 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 very seasoned old men and women that run amongst this country that a lot of us have forgotten existed. And so that's my world. I love that. I love history. I love hearing those people's stories. But let's move past that. So now all of a sudden they're coming home. We should have, if we would have stayed with Ho Chi Minh, but the trail, like we didn't, because guess why? We caved to political pressure. And here we are. So everybody's coming home, and they're getting no kind of reception whatsoever. They're getting in fact, in a lot of ways, they're being spat on. They're being whatever. They're being outcast.
They're told not to wear their uniform before they get off the plane, change into something civilian.
That would hurt my feelings. The first time I ever flew, and this is an aside, but the first time I ever flew outside of training was on September 11th. And it was, 2001. I graduated 2005. So it was at least 7-8 years after 9/11. But on September 11th, being for the first time in my life, permanent party in the United States Army as a soldier, getting to walk into the airport in Atlanta and fly from there to San Antonio. I will never, for the rest of my life, I will never forget. I did not pay for a drink. I did not pay for a meal. I did not pay for libations that were illegal that I shouldn't have been consuming. I did not pay for anything that entire trip. Fortunately, I remember most of it. But people tried to make that difficult, because at that time, soldiers were, on 9/11 in an airport, it was like being a god in a way. And I say that very loosely. Understand? Those of you that watch the show know my opinion on deity and the Almighty. But as a, you watch these superheroes run around. My son's 4. He watched Marvel. Okay, like I felt like Thor. Like in that moment, I felt like Thor, right? And so for that to be my reception for, by the way, our response to 9/11, very similar to that in Vietnam, for those of you that are ignorant. And then to look back in history and see Vietnam veterans received very differently than my experience, which, by the way, history repeating itself. Afghanistan, Iraq veterans are starting to receive a very different reception as they come back. Not here, though. Not here. But so tell me about that. What was that like? That's really the bottom line of this book is finding those tell me the number.
23.
23. 31 stuck in my mind for some reason. Absolutely wrong. 23 men here in our area that returned to no welcome whatsoever.
Right. One of them actually graduated from Athens State College, Morgan William Weed. And when he was drafted, he was in law school at Alabama.
Drafted. Could we die? Oh, man. You need to come back. We're going to need to do this again, because I'm going to run out of time. Because if the draft happened right now, you'd have a bunch of entitled millennials saying, I'm not going. I ain't going.
We did. We turned from I'm going to do all I can to help to I'm going to do my own thing.
I will do what I want, when I want, how I want. And that includes my parents. That includes... Well, anyway, I'm not going to lead you down. We'll go down that trail. It'll end up like me and Allie's podcast on Friday, just everywhere. So,
but these 23, they encountered some who were very well decorated and very well received at the early part of the war. And then as the war went on and these men came home, and the parents, the families couldn't even discuss it with people. They just had to have a burial and go on with it and not even discuss their feelings, not be able to talk about the war because it was so controversial, and be called baby killers or all of the things that they heard. So they kept it inside. And once Don and Heather Collins started searching for these people, then they called the families and they got them together. They met at a church, and it was like a reunion of people who had never met, but yet they were family. So they were able to share about their sons and what had happened to them and to their families. And it was a unity that they both it took over the whole building. And they wanted to capture that somehow. They wanted to unify these families who gave so much, sacrificed so much, and find a way to unify them and help them realize they were not alone and they were appreciated. Their service was valuable. So they've taken it on themselves to make sure that every single gravesite has a flag. Don told me these men served under a flag. They fought under a flag. They came home draped under a flag. And they deserve to have a flag flying over them now. And I said, yes, sir, I will write that book.
Yeah. No, I feel like, remember when we started this, I said I wouldn't endeavor to write a book. I feel convicted right now that maybe I probably would in this circumstance because and here's the thing, that history will tell you all that you need to know about where we're going if you'll just listen. And we listen to, or we watch on Facebook just a emotional response to these videos of men coming home from service and surprising their family members. We have this emotional response to the Delta Airlines people that bring a corpse. I mean, look, I'm going to make it less sexy. I'm going to call it what it is. Bring a dead corpse back from war and in the Middle East, draped in a flag, and we let the wife come, and we don't disembark the plane because we want to give them their moment. And we make these big celebratory posts on social media, and in the same breath, we support a governmental and economic structure that will not continue to give us those things that we just 5 minutes ago celebrated. And if you'll listen to history, like, I'm 33. I'm not by any stretch wise or old or any of those things. But I am at least wise enough to listen to history. And if you're unwilling to do that, like, I was going to go somewhere I'm not going to go, but we could very well talk about those who choose to forego their safety or their liberty. I mean, there's a ton of constitutional quotes I could throw at you. Last time I did that, I was talking about the blood of tyrants and the tree of liberty, and a little Ben Franklin. That wasn't as well received, but we live in a society that doesn't love freedom like it used to, and so I can't help that. I did before. Look, it's already 3:35. We're going to run out of time quickly today, which I knew it would happen because this is something that I love very much, and obviously you've written multiple books on it, and in terms of the time frame and the history, something you love as well. I wanted to dive into these chapter titles because I see some. She's gonna lob me the softball, and then I'm gonna hit it out of the park. So just hang tight. It's gonna be fun. 1930s in America: How Americans Lived After the Stock Market Crash, Hitler's Promises and Rise, Mao's Immersion into Marxism, Small Town American Insight. So I'm gonna cross some of this stuff out. No one here cares about Mao or Marxism because it's like history wrote that off. If you're an American, like, we just write that off because it's not one, it's scary, but two, everyone knows Hitler. Everyone knows the stock market crash. Everyone lives in small town, or they think they do, even though it may not be that small. So let's talk about that. How did Americans live after the stock market crash? Because that is a period of history I find myself very much interested in, especially in the last 5 months.
They lived in communities. They worked together. They stood on their faith. They held to their faith. They had come through hard times together, and they counted on each other to be there for each other during those hard times. They did not look to their government for any kind of bailout or...
Are you listening?
or any help. They helped each other. They learned to live off the land. They had chickens, and if they had hens, they had eggs for breakfast. May have had them for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They sat on the front porches and shelled beans. If somebody came by and wanted something to eat, they would give them a can of beans to take home with them or share what they had. They met in community churches and had fellowship meals together. They took care of one another.
So, and before, I'm sorry, Robert Rigsby, he watches every day. Robert, first of all, he wanted to say, kind of throw this up there. Thank you for writing the book. My father-in-law was in Vietnam in the Army as a helicopter pilot. And then he also asked, can he find your books, which we just posted in the comments there for you, Robert. But Robert, thank you for tuning in. He asked me to run for president the other day, so I may take him up on that. We'll see. I've got to meet with some of my sound counsel. Allie told me I could do it, so no, white males makes it tough. Anyways, I'm kidding. It was a joke. Bad joke, maybe, but it was a joke.
Well, thank you, Robert. And I do plan to attend the Vietnam Helicopter Pilot Association annual reunion next year. They have canceled it for this year, but I do plan to. I've been invited to attend. So honored to be able to.
Look, if you don't know, if you've not read any of the stories of the helicopter pilots in Vietnam, there have been some. Look, there's some warrant officers all over this country that are walking around right now, and some that helicopters got shot down in movies like Lone Survivor that you've probably watched, or in stories that you've probably never heard. Iraq and Afghanistan has been a very chopper-heavy war, but what happened in Vietnam, the lack of technology that our warriors carried into battle, and the just what I would call cojones of these men and women that would get in these planes and fly them all over the place in Vietnam. Like, there are some incredible stories of helicopter pilots in Vietnam that if you've not taken, I mean, just Google that alone, and you will read about a level of courage that doesn't, in my opinion, exist in modern culture. But anyway, so that we were talking about before Robert's comment, we were talking about the stock market crash, the Great Depression. My great grandmother grew up about 40 minutes from here in a tent in the middle of a field, which was eventually my backyard some years later. And we picked cotton. That was what we did. That was our family's thing, was we picked cotton. And so, they lived in a tent. She had 8 kids. So my grandmother she has 7 brothers and sisters, of which there's, I think, 3 left. And so we are currently losing the greatest generation that ever walked the face of this planet. And if you think anything else, you're an idiot, because that generation, you're talking about the generation that wore a jacket and a tie to school for pictures. The generation that my uncle, for instance, he turned down a scholarship to Ole Miss to play football to pick cotton with his mom because he needed to help the family pay for the land.
Mm-hmm. That was the do our part generation.
That's
they
exactly
believed
right.
in using it up, wearing it out, or do without.
So talk to me about Hitler's promises and rise. I think we're going to find ourselves, and I'm not going to step on too many toes here, but probably just just most of them. Hitler's promises and rise. I'm interested to hear your take on that.
He promised equality.
Uh-oh.
I've heard that a lot lately here. But he promised that he would take care of everyone, and he had such a charismatic...
He was good. He was good.
And
if you've not listened to one of his speeches, go back, because it was breathtaking. I mean, it was very Obama-esque. What?
He knows how to captivate an audience.
I'm sorry, I take it back. No, I don't either. I'm just kidding.
Sorry, not sorry.
Yeah, that's right. I like her. She's going to be on maybe regularly after this. This is fantastic. But so, I mean, he promised equality. He did a lot to like... But then here's where I want to go ahead.
Well, he promised all the things that they wanted to hear first. Mm-hmm. And he would get the crowd roused up and so excited. And then he would slightly blame the Jews. And then he would go on and talk about how it's going to be so wonderful once I there. And then the next speech, he would talk about all the things they wanted to hear, and he would again. But it's all the Jews' fault. So he gradually blamed the Jews on everything until they heard it over and over and over and over. And in their excitement of the speech, they began to feel like, the Jews are the problem. And so he was able to dictate himself, the Führer, the ultimate ruler, take out any scripture reference that had to do with God, other than the ones that sounded pretty good to him. But once he did that, and he was the ultimate ruler, all he had to do was contact Himmler, and Himmler started setting up the camps.
So just to be clear, and I will indict all those who need indicting, including myself on here on a daily basis, because every time I sit here and preach at you, I understand I'm looking right in the mirror first and foremost. And so one of the things that you said there that is just terrifying to me is that, like, the Constitution of the United States, those men that met and threw all that tea in the harbor and said, we're not going to fall under this regime. By the way, that's a word that we use now. Now that it's popular and cool and sexy, we'll use regime. But at the time, like, that's what they were dealing with, was a regime. It was a total control government. Okay. And so at that time, these men met together. They wrote a whole bunch of books, rules, regulations, papers, you name it. And in every one of them, they declared God Almighty, just to be clear. So your separation of church and state, we talked about that last week on Friday. You could throw that out. That's not what what the Freedom from Religion Foundation tells you is a bunch of hogwash, okay? It is only to protect you from being forced to serve a God you don't believe in. It's got nothing to do with inhibiting my right to serve God Almighty, who I would call my God, but he's also yours. And so, you take away that from the very foundation of this country, and then you listen to what we just heard about what Hitler said and did and how he said and did it. He was a smooth operator that used subversive language and propaganda to subconsciously share a message about a people group he didn't like. And he exterminated them like rats over and over and over. He mobilized an entire continent, more or less, to come and fight a war over the extermination of one people group. Do you hear me? Do you hear me? Like, the tie-ins here to where we live today are unbelievable. And for those of you that are like, oh, this guy's crazy, this guy's an idiot, he's a nutbag, right wing, like, I'm not even a Republican. I love the Constitution and Jesus, and that is it. Donald Trump is a buffoon, but he's the best buffoon option I've got. Right. And so at the end of the day, like, I'm not some Trump for lifer. I'm not some party liner. None of this is. None of this, by the way. You cannot say Vietnam is a right-wing narrative. You cannot say that what we're talking about today is politically motivated, or, like, it is history. I remember a day when my history book looked very different than the history books that my son will unfortunately have to study. Like, I want to speak to that, and we are going to have to do this again because we're going to run out of time, and we only got through chapter 1. And, like, let me just read you a couple of these. Hitler, Stalin, and Mao compared to glimpses of life in America. That one's going to be uncomfortable. Communism expands to Cuba. Ho Chi Minh gives himself the name Ho Chi Minh, quote unquote, who enlightens. Japan attacks U.S. naval base in Pearl Harbor. Like, and that's 4. And there are, let's see here, how many chapters are there? Where's the next one? Here it is, 14, 15, 20. There's 20. We've gotten to 4, and we've talked about 1, so you're going to have to come back. I'm just going to make that, I'm going to make that declaration. Now, she might have a different thing to say after she gets off with this lunatic over here, but she's going to have to come back because this is great. But let's talk about the whole concept of politicizing and you, and I'm sure you've experienced some unpleasantries. Like, you've not walked through this process without. So let's talk about that for a minute. Let's talk about the people that don't like history, because it tells, first of all, history doesn't tell you, it warns you. That's a tweetable. Somebody better tweet that. Zach Walker, Hometown Heartbeat, episode number 48. History doesn't tell you, it warns you. Connor, tweet that right now. Tweet that. I mean, it's not, we don't have Twitter. That's something we don't do. But we're on the Facebooks and the Instabook, so we're going to be good there. But let's talk about that. Noah Bishop says Vietnam is a Democrat war. Noah Bishop likes to come in hot. Noah Bishop is he's a veteran. He's a CIA. Like, what he's saying is, no, don't mince words. Restate that in a way that's less politically correct, and then we'll come back to it. So let's talk about.
Well, talking about history books in Vietnam.
Yes, that's how accurate.
I can tell you now that in Vietnam, they teach the children that the day Saigon fell is what we consider the end of freedom for South Vietnamese. They consider it liberation from Americans. They're taught that Americans were the enemy and that we were invading and trying to take over their country. So they celebrate liberation from America. They are changing the history books. Ho Chi Minh did it. I hope that our history books are not being subverted like that. But in Unsung Heroes and in The Ground Kisser, I tried to stay with very much facts.
That's a terrifying concept, by the way. That's a concept that's died in this country.
We've changed from news to opinion. And if it offends you and you have an opinion that it offends you, that doesn't make it fact.
No, I had Dale Jackson on the other day. He was on last week, and we were talking about that exact thing, and I think, honestly, we struggled to put a timeline on it, and you put a timeline on it. And so if you put this podcast in context of 48, this is going to be a better history book than you'll ever read in school, by the way. But it gives us that definitive, and I'm not saying factually definitive. I'm saying, again, on this show, we're happy to tell you in its opinion, all of it. It's my opinion. Now, I interpret fact, and I tell you what's fact, and I tell you what's opinion. And I'm not afraid of that. Like, I'm a commentator. Now, I'm going to give you facts, but I'm also going to tell you what I think about them. And you should think the same way if you're smart. If you're not, I understand. It's no big deal. Like, it's difficult. English is hard. I get it. But like, commentating is here. News is here. And you gave me a definitive line. You said Walter Cronkite, before he went to Vietnam, and if you've not heard Walter Cronkite read the news, first of all, you're missing out. That is a national treasure. If you look in our history, hearing Walter Cronkite read the happenings of the day, week, month, whatever, in a unbiased, but just that voice. I have
the transcript of him reading when JFK was shot. I have the transcript in here, along with some of how it affected him. He took off his glasses. He had to wipe his eyes. He had to take a deep breath. But he was reporting the news.
Mm-hmm. And for us, by the way, for my generation, that was September 11, 2001. I was in a classroom, in Miss Baker's science classroom in Chantilly, Virginia, in 9th grade, and I watched a plane fly into a second building in real time, live on the news. And let me tell you something. For those of you that have been taught that a partisan America is not relatively new, you're wrong. Like, because in 2001, Sammy Sosa, like, by the way, let's look at Kaepernick and what he did. Okay, this is recent, and then let's go back to 2001. Mark McGwire, it was baseball season. I saw more flags rounding all four bases with home runs. Politics didn't matter. Color didn't matter. By the way, are you hearing me? Race relations. Color didn't matter. American means American. And by the way, when I signed up to go to the Army, I didn't say, well, I just want to. I mean, can I just protect white people? Is that possible? Is that something I can do? Because it's not. You sign up to protect Americans. You sign up to be an American soldier. All of our credos and what we rehearse and we say and all this stuff. It's I am an American soldier. That's how they all start. I am an American. Not I'm a white American soldier, or I'm a black American or African American or Indian American. No, I am an American. That concept is gone. And I believe it started. Apparently, I didn't know this until today. I'm learning right now that it's very realistic. We could point, if we dropped a pin on a map and said journalism at this point right here, it took a turn. Now, I'm not saying it completely turned, because again, in 2001, we saw it was politicized in some capacity, but only after we went across the berm. Only after George Bush said, we're going to cross the berm into Iraq, did it become politicized. You know why? Because political capital was to be gained at that moment when you got thousands of Americans jumping out of buildings to kill themselves rather than deal with the heat. It's really hard to politicize that.
And it was on video.
Oh.
And that was part of what
If you've never seen those, do not Google them.
That was part of what turned America against Vietnam. The images started coming in. I have in here one of the 23 from Morgan County, Mr. Randall, was one who was in a Marine unit with an embed photographer. And after he was hit by mortar fire and he was lying on his back, the other Marine medic to help him, leaned over him, and the photographer started shooting. She heard the shot and she saw him run. She started shooting. He leaned over him to hear a heartbeat. So you have this image of a man embracing another man with his head, listening for a heartbeat. His heartbeat was fading. So he looks up to see if he can see or hear those helicopters that would come to evacuate.
Choppers, right.
And the look of anguish on his face, and then his hand on there. There is a bronze statue, Hill 881, made of that scene. The photographer was later interviewed by Paris Magazine, and the medic, was also interviewed. And she described him as being lost in a jungle of his own mind. He returned from Vietnam, but his mind is still there. And he said those pictures are what haunts him. And they haunted all of us.
It's a really, Connor, it gives me an idea. Pull up a notepad and write this down. Taking pictures that tell that as Americans we have archived them as turning point moments or cornerstone moments. Like I just think of, there's a ton I think of. I'm not even going to mention them because it's going to be a great segment, and we're looking for segments right now, so that'll be good. But no, I didn't even think through that, because to me, like, if you look at the timeline, think about, okay, and this is going to be it. We're gonna have to end, because I'm gonna go hang out with my family and cook some steaks and stuff. But you think about the first part of the Afghanistan-Iraq war. I remember, like, you got to take your. I mean, a lot of guys wore GoPros on their helmets. Mm-hmm. And they documented their own war in a lot of ways. And then you have some idiots running around doing some things they ought not be doing with some dead bodies and whatever else. Look, they're angry, they're mad, they're whatever. I'm not saying it's right, but they did things they shouldn't have been doing. That gets taken away, and all of a sudden the journalist in bed. And it's because why? And it goes back to history being our greatest teacher. Is an image. There's nothing more visceral than an image. Outside of music, which they put 2 images, and now you're talking about superpower, right? I could tell whatever story I want with an image, because I can spin it however I want to spin it. Unless you saw the 30 seconds before and the 30 seconds after, you have no idea what happened. You have no idea what. I mean, you see a man laying over a man and looking at what. I mean, well, I could spin that 100 different ways. You got a medic checking a pulse on a guy that just got shot. There's the truth. Or you've got an American longfully waiting for American chopper that's long away to come in and save this American who's been left alone on the battlefield in Vietnam. Same picture, 2 very different comments, both accurate depending on who you're listening to.
But Americans had become accustomed to and wanted the sensational reporting. Once they got
if it bleeds, it leads. You said that earlier.
Yes, and they had a taste for it, and they wanted it. And the photographer lived with great regret. He said that he would much rather have been remembered for another series of photographs he took, and I have one of them in here. It's a photograph of a Vietnamese couple, a woman with a couple of children, who tried to escape to Thailand. After the fall of Saigon, they had no hope other than escape. So they tried to escape to Thailand, and they were turned back. And so he took a series of pictures of that woman and some others on the boat and called it The Boat with No Smiles. He said, I would love to have been remembered for that rather than this, because it turned such hatred within the American public toward this war without realizing the Vietnamese. They were looking at the American casualties instead of looking what we were fighting for, which was freedom for the Vietnamese.
Yeah, that's so funny you say that, because, and we're going to end with this today, but I just saw a commentary. In fact, for those of you that follow me on Facebook, you know personally that I don't involve myself in politics personally. Here, I have no problem. But on my page, it's about me and my family and and you know what, I've got grandmothers and grandfathers and whatever. They might not agree with what I have to say. They might, and I respect that. And so that's a place for me to show off my family, my son, my wife, my whatever's going on. Here, this is an opinion. And I'll say that 100,000 times. I'll say it till I'm blue in the face. I'm a commentator, okay? I'm a commentator, okay? I'm kidding. I'm not going to say it again. But I just saw a meme that came out, and it said, coronavirus surpasses all deaths in Vietnam. And I just put it together. When you just said that just a moment ago, I just put it together for the first time in 33 years. Like, it, again, you lost sight of what was important in that war, what we were fighting against. We were not fighting against Americans not dying. We were fighting against evil.
May I add?
Absolutely.
58,000 men and women died in Vietnam, American casualties in Vietnam. After we pulled out, 250,000 Vietnamese died at the hands of communists.
Give peace a chance.
Didn't work.
Give peace a chance. Only 250,000. That's better off. They're better off that way, right? If we let's whitewash, rewrite history. I guess they must have been better off, right? There's no way. There's no way. And you talk about Nazi Germany and what they did to people, and we look at Vietnam as if nothing happened, as if we. Anyways, I'm not gonna go. It's Memorial Day, and I want to leave you with this. We're gonna head out, and we've all got places to go and people to see, and friends to mourn, and lives to celebrate. And so I'm gonna leave you with this. Like, I hear many of you talking about the reason for the season come December. Okay, we hit the tail end of December. You're going to be talking about you're going to be mad as heck when somebody puts Xmas up. I'm talking about you're just going to storm the gates of hell with a water pistol because somebody said Xmas. They must not want to say Christ's name. They didn't want to say Christ. They just want to say X. Well, we better call it Happy Holidays, by God, because we can't say Christmas. Like, if you are the same person that's running around saying Happy Memorial Day, getting hammered on a friggin' boat somewhere and acting a fool, you have completely missed the concept of what today represents. Like, as a Christian, I celebrate Jesus, his birth, his resurrection. It's what gives me the opportunity and what I've received as the gift of eternal life. In the same way, and I'm not putting Memorial Day by any stretch on this, but the reverence that comes with both ought to translate. And so for those of you that are running around today saying Happy Memorial Day, you're wrong. And you're going to piss somebody off. And they're probably going to be an operator that's more than capable of whooping your tail. And I don't want to be Brad Wallace. I'm talking to you. I don't want to be in the guy's boat that makes Brad Wallace mad, although he's a pretty docile guy. But I guarantee you he could if he had to. And so at the end of the day, like, one, drive safe. Don't do anything stupid. There's nothing worth it. First of all, men and women didn't die in combat so that you could die in a car crash today because you got drunk celebrating their death, which is misguided in and of the first place. Second of all, if you don't know Jesus, like, let me tell you about that guy, because that will change. I mean, it gives context to everything we've talked about today. We've talked about death a lot. In a lot of ways, we've talked about death, and there's only one that truly matters, because he rose from the grave 3 days later to signify the rebirth that we're not gonna go all the way there, but just look, if you have questions about that, like, look, we'll answer all of them. Lisa will happily talk to you about this book, about Vietnam, about all that. I will answer anything you want to know about Jesus, and I will tie the two together for those of you like, man, why do you go? Like, it's Memorial Day. We're talking about it. You don't understand maybe the tie in there, but these men and women in this era, they ran off to war clinging to a God that established a constitutional republic that they were fighting for. They ran off fighting for that, and they came back to nothing. And that's a shame. And Lisa, I just want to thank you personally for your sorry, got me there. I want to thank you for your commitment to telling these stories. And I want you to finish the show with that statement that you have, that quote in that statement. But for me personally, like, thank you as a veteran, as a 33-year-old American that loves our country. Thank you. And for all of those who served before I had the chance that didn't get a chance to tell you, like, truly thank you, because what you're doing is making a difference, whether you feel it. I know that a lot of time goes in, maybe there's not a financial return, maybe there's not a return, but I promise there's a return in gratitude, and I just want to do my part to express that today. So truly, I mean this. Thank you so much for what you're doing for our veterans.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for helping me get the word out. Excuse me. It gets me too.
It's tough.
It gets me too.
I mean, it's tough.
You may remember another Alabama veteran, Jeremiah Denton. He also served in the Congress for a number of years, but he was held hostage for many years. He was tortured. He famously blinked in Morse code torture when people like Jane Fonda had been and said, oh, they're well treated here. He blinked torture during that so that he could communicate that to his audience. When he was released from the Hanoi Hilton in February of 1973, he was asked how he endured his years of captivity under extreme brutality. I'll let you read the book and find out the kind of things they did to this man. U.S. Navy Commander Jeremiah Denton replied, "It was faith in God and faith in country. We are honored to have had the opportunity to serve our country under difficult circumstances. We are profoundly grateful To our Commander-in-Chief and to our nation for this day, God bless America.
Honored and profoundly grateful to have been tortured in a prisoner of war camp in Vietnam for how long?
I believe 9 years.
I was going to say, I wasn't going to guess 9 years. Look, it is Hometown Heartbeat, the Pulse of Americana, episode 48. Lisa, thank you so much for joining us. If you want to catch the replay, the podcast, whatever podcast, everywhere you get them, Apple, iTunes, Spotify, you name it, we're there. YouTube, there'll be a replay, and there will be many highlights that come from this one. So stay tuned. We should know on Monday about our radio gig and should be able to give you the full details. In the meantime, you guys observe this day for what it is. Enjoy the time with your family. You can say have a great day and enjoy that time because it is a holiday and it is meant to be enjoyed. So, guys, love you guys. We will see you tomorrow. Tomorrow we have another great guest. It's going to be all about 9/11 and the fight to get the health and pension benefits for 9/11 survivors and those who died from the cancer related. Connor, take it away, buddy. Love you guys. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.